Hey gang, how's it going, and welcome back to VR Essentials, where we talk about the practical uses of virtual reality and everything about the metaverse. Today's video, very exciting, as we're going to be putting together two super cool routers, the, of course, Asus classic XT8 6600 series versus the Rog Rapture, the brand new Rog Rapture, in fact, GT AX 11000 Pro series, which is an updated series from the previous versions. So the purpose of this experiment is really to put the Rog Rapture through its paces and see whether it's really worth spending the extra bucks in getting this piece of a router versus just, upgrading and spending a few $100s on the classic, for example, XT8 router series. Expect a whole bunch of action-packed different tests inside of today's video, which I'm pretty sure is really going to be quite insightful in giving you that ultimate decision whether it's worth upgrading to the Rog Rapture GT AX 11000 Pro. This includes, of course, the various different bit rates that we're going to be tweaking inside of Virtual Desktop. We're also going to look at different super sample settings inside of SteamVR, going from 100% all the way to pushing the limits at 400%. And of course, we are going to be using No Man's Sky, which is an amazing science fiction discovery VR app. So just to let you know that the configuration of my computer is a very solid medium build. We're looking at an NVIDIA RTX 2070 using an i7-9700K graphics card and a Hero Maximus 11 motherboard. Now I'll be conducting the test inside of my actual studio, which is located about 10 meters away from both routers, which are both set up to my 1 GHz broadband network. And there's also going to be a door in between that I'm going to close, and of course that means that there's a wall there as well. As always, there are some timestamps in the description below, as well as the pinned comments, so do go there to refer and skip to wherever you wish you feel is most important in today's video, as we are going to look at absolutely everything, including latency, graphics, sound, audio, and all this good stuff. But first, a shout out to our sponsor of the day, VR-Wave.Store, your all-in-one go-to place for your lens prescription adapters. 5% discount when you use the promo code VR Essentials. Now, I will be using the Pico 4, which is that one located over there right next to the HP Reverb G2. And do hit the notification bell after you subscribe, as I'll be doing more testing using the G2 as well, comparing the gameplay graphics with the Pico 4 in future videos. So you're definitely not going to want to miss all those cool videos as well. So if you're not familiar with No Man's Sky, it is, as I mentioned before, an absolutely beautiful VR experience, as you can go and wander around space and just visit and travel through so many different planets. It's absolutely mind-boggling. There are a whole bunch of different things there, from terraforming, you can build things, you can farm, you can look at all the various different and discover all the various different animals and meet a whole bunch of new friends as well. So it's just an amazing experience that frankly is recommended to most of us. Now you're going to notice inside of the video there's actually a lot of side-by-side comparisons, and if you look at the top right and the top left of the screen, it will let you know exactly the super sampling settings that are used inside of SteamVR, as well as the actual bitrate in which both routers were capable to go at maximum. However, I need to make it very clear that both routers did not go at the maximum all the time. There was a lot of fluctuation in terms of the bitrate, and we will be talking about this further along in this video. Now, I've done a lot of other videos on the channel, which you're very welcome to go and check out, that actually speak about the specifications of each router. However, if you really want to know what are the differences between both routers, then do go and hit the link in the description as well, which will lead you to a web page where you can see side by side exactly what are the differences between the ATX from Asus and also the Rog Rapture GT AX 11000 Pro. Now, the first thing you need to know is the fact that No Man's Sky really does need a lot of computing power, and using an RTX 2070 is really tough to get very good graphics, even at the highest that you can think of. And for the purpose of this video, and I will put my best graphics that I was able to get out of No Man's Sky at the end of this video, but throughout the entire first part of the video, well, the graphics that I actually used were actually super high. So all the tessellation, the actual world graphics, or the super sampling and all these kind of different things are actually set to more or less maximum, except for reflections and I think also shadows. But as I mentioned, using an RTX 2070 is really tough, and you're going to find that using super sampling at 100%, everything is more or less going to be blurry. And I have to admit that the recording that you can see on the computer screen there is much better than the actual experience that I had inside of the Pico 4. So, good brownie points here for Pico for enabling much better graphic quality when you're recording out of the bat. In terms of what it shows you on the computer screen versus what you're actually experiencing inside of the Pico 4 itself. Because I have to admit that my experience at 100% super sampling, both with the XT8 and also the Rog Rapture GT AX 11000 Pro series, just weren't good at super sampling of 100%. I had to bump up the SteamVR settings to 200% because, as I mentioned, 100% just wasn't doing it and was really giving me, a bit motion sickness, to be honest with you. Now, the actual difference between 100 and 200% was night and day. The graphics were just really much, much better, and the experience there was just much more comfortable for me. Now, just a pro tip here that if you are going to bump up the SteamVR super sampling, do make sure you do it incrementally. Don't go all the way to 400 or 500% because what will happen is basically, especially it will differ from one VR app to another VR app, you might find that basically everything will really start to have so much latency that it will really give you a huge headache really straight away. You won't really be able to move anything around. Everything will move so slowly. You won't be able to press on anything. It'll just be a complete nightmare. So do be very careful there. Now at 200%, I have to admit that though, it was okay, it was manageable, and these things, generally speaking, you can change if you're going to go back into your virtual desktop and bring down the latency, the bitrate of the latency, so that you can basically have less latency, but of course this will affect the graphics as well, so you may find that you have more artifacting in some areas, especially in darker areas. So when No Man's Sky is playing, let's say at nighttime, then these things will definitely be much more noticeable compared to when you're playing at daytime. And also if you increase the bitrate, by the way, it will eat up more battery in your actual Pico 4 as well. Now, I wanted to know how far I could actually push the Rog Rapture to its maximum limit. So what I did was I went back inside of SteamVR and cranked up the super sampling all the way to 400%. In fact, it was just a little bit more than that. It was about 404%. And I left all the graphics inside of No Man's Sky itself all the way up to the maximum as well, except for the reflections and also the shadows. And of course, inside of Virtual Desktop, I left all the bitrate cranked up all the way to the maximum as well, which is about 150%. So that was, going to be very interesting. But, unfortunately, my RTX 2070 wasn't able to take it. And as you could see on the actual video footage itself, there was a lot of latency there. I really wasn't able to, walk around, move around really easily. And the blinders, when I would rotate my head, would, of course, be even much worse. It was just a complete nightmare. And when you would actually bring up the SteamVR menu, that you wanted to change things on the fly, it was even worse. I couldn't even really move anything, to be honest with you. So, it was an interesting test there just to, make you see actually as to what would happen. And, of course, the same thing happened, of course, with the XT8 Asus router too. So don't think that if you can do it with, the Rog Rapture, you can do it with the XT8. No. You really cannot. However, there are some huge differences between the XT8 and the Rog Rapture, I have to admit. So do stay tuned for this, and do make sure you hit the notification bell after you subscribe to the channel, because of course I will bring you more tests using other VR apps. And do leave a comment below. Let me know exactly what apps you want me to test, as I'll be bringing this to you very shortly in other videos very soon. Now, after doing several testing with the Rog Rapture, I was actually able to bring it all the way to 250% in SteamVR Super Sampling. That really is the most optimum that I can get it at. But to be honest with you, 230, 210 possibly is really where the best setting would be in terms of the maximum, simply because at 250, well, I did get a lot of blinders on the side as well, even when I was moving my head, relatively not really fast, not really abruptly. but I mean, it didn't really disturb me, to be honest with you. It didn't give me motion sickness or, make me feel very uncomfortable. But the fact that it was there did make me, break the immersion here and there inside of the game itself. And some of the animated things, like for example, poisonous plants, or when you would see the animals running away from you or running towards you even, or all these kind of different things, or when you're inside of the starship as well and you're moving around, then 250% did really stretch the limit, because there would be a little bit of latency here and there, especially when you're moving your arms. If you have the full bodysuit on, things definitely worked much better when you could not see the whole suit, the legs, the arms, all these different things. It really was best to just have the hands, and that's it. But what really amazed me the most using the Rog Rapture GT AX 11000 Pro is the fact that it really fluctuated in terms of its own bitrate. It was, most of the time it was around, I would say 720 Mbps, but it could also reach 800 plus Mbps, which is why I put the maximum number on the actual video. But a lot of the times I did notice that for some reason, suddenly my screen would really have a lot of pixelation on it, or a lot of artifacting on it, which I thought was quite strange. So when I would revisit the actual Mbps of the virtual desktop, I noticed that it would go all the way to 128 Mbps. Now, I did make sure that inside of the actual app on the mobile phone, I did turn on the gaming booster to make sure that I would have as much Mbps or bitrate running, as possible whilst I was running a virtual desktop. But, again, it was fluctuating quite a lot. I really had to be closer towards my door to make sure that I didn't have as many issues as I would with the XT8. And we are going to talk about the XT8 right now, because there were a lot of differences, when comparing it to the Rog Rapture. So, just in conclusion, in terms of the Rog Rapture here, I just was very, very sometimes disappointed that I couldn't get the clock rates to be as consistent as possible as it was giving me in previous experiences. So now turning to the Asus XT8 6600 series, it was actually quite different, my experience, to be honest with you, which was kind of weird, I have to admit, and you're going to be pretty surprised by the actual findings that I was able to get from all these various different tests. Now, first of all, at 100% in Super Sampling and SteamVR, as I mentioned before, it was just really, really hard. And again, the Pico 4 does an amazing job in actually recording the footage, as it seems to be much better there on the video as my actual experience inside. I mean, it was really hard to see anything, especially further away in the horizon. Just things pixelated so badly. Oh, it was just a real headache. And by the way, I forgot to mention that with the Rog Rapture, when I went to Super Sampling 400, the actual bitrate inside of Virtual Desktop does change. It would no longer let me go all the way to 150. It would only go to about 123 Mbps as its maximum limit. Now, after testing all the various different Super Sampling inside of SteamVR, the best optimum graphics I was able to get out of the RTX 2070 streaming with the Pico 4 and Virtual Desktop with the XT8, well, that was actually bumping it up to 234%. Now, I did notice, however, that, whenever I would bump up the actual app itself, well, unfortunately, I did also get the blinders on the side when I would move my head from left to right, and that is just something that comes with the Pico 4. So as I mentioned, I really do believe that you will need a more powerful computer, most probably a 3000 series, maybe the 380. I will try to see if I can go to a friend's house and test the headset at their place or a shop somewhere, because I really do believe that that is really what you're going to need. But I cannot confirm, if you have a 380 or 4000 series and a Pico 4 with Virtual Desktop and a Wi-Fi 6 router, then please leave a comment below, and let us know whether, it really does help, or whether you actually still get the blinders when you're streaming, No Man's Sky to SteamVR. Now, the biggest difference that I had in terms of the streaming quality comparing the Asus XT8 with the Rog Rapture GT AX 11000 Pro series is the fact that the actual band itself was much more consistent with the XT8, even though I was positioned inside of my studio 10 meters away from the router with the door closed and the wall in between. Even though the maximum was 400 Mbps in terms of its bitrate, compared to, of course, 720 or even 840, excuse me, on the Rog Rapture itself. I just felt like the gameplay was much smoother with the XT8 because I didn't get so many fluctuations in terms of the bitrate. It didn't really go down so much to 122 or 188 or back to 480 every single second or every minute. It seemed to have just stayed constant at a certain bitrate, and every time I did check the actual bitrate inside of my virtual desktop, which you can do, it just more or less always was at the same place. And whether it was, at 300 or 288 or 400, it didn't seem to matter because I didn't seem to experience that much artifacting as I was playing along with the actual Asus XT8 compared to the Rog Rapture. Now, the Rog Rapture is supposed to be able to go all the way to 11,000 Mbps. So if you do have a much better broadband network than mine, which is only limited to 1 gigabyte, then obviously I can't go higher than that. But also the good thing with the Rog Rapture is the fact that it is triband, so I was able to go from one band to the other band when I was experiencing some issues. But I have to admit that for some reason or other, and I was streaming, by the way, in the middle of the day, and there's only maybe 3 or 4 devices hooked up to each single network, so not that many, I have to admit with you. And the Rog Rapture is supposed to be an epic gaming router, but for some reason my network provider was not able to boost the Rog Rapture to the maximum and keep the actual bitrates consistent, which really did affect the actual quality of the graphics inside of No Man's Sky. And I was very, very surprised about this, comparing it to the XT8, which was much more consistent, as I mentioned. Even though the bitrate was half what it was supposed to be, I just had a much better experience inside of No Man's Sky comparing it to the Rog Rapture. However, it is very true that in terms of graphics, I did think that the graphics were slightly better inside of the Rog Rapture, simply because I was able to go higher in terms of the super sampling. I could bring it up all the way to 250, even though, yes, it is true that the best optimized, let's say, playability without having so many black blinders around or some form of little tiny bit of latency would have probably been, let's say, around 225 or 210. Well, the same goes with the XT8. I was able to push it all the way to 234, where it was more or less, let's say, comfortable. But to have the optimum comfort with the XT8 would have I would say be around 190. So there is a difference there. Then the other difference is the fact that, well, with virtual desktop itself and the bitrate there, with the actual XT8, I could bump it up all the way to, let's say, 106 Mbps, which would basically be, I would say, again, the maximum before it would have any big latency issues or, uncomfortable issues or issues where, it felt like my gloves were a little bit, let's say, there was some latency there, so where I would pull it up or pull it down or move my hands around, then I could feel a little bit of latency. So I couldn't really go all the way to 150 with the XT8, that is true. However, with the with the Rog Rapture GT AX 11000 Pro, then I could definitely bump it up to 150. So there are definitely some differences there. But in terms of playability with an RTX 2070 i7-9700K and also a Hero Maximus 11 motherboard, then I have to say that the XT8 Asus router definitely gave me a lot more bang for my buck, I would say, compared to the actual Rog Rapture. Now, after all the testing that I did inside of No Man's Sky with both routers, I can tell you right away that unfortunately, I was not able to get rid of the actual blinders, the black things that you get when you rotate your head from side by side. However, I don't have all these issues in other VR applications, including Half-Life Alyx or, with the car sims, with AMS2, or, even with After the Fall. So do go and check out all these other videos where I did some testing there, and do hit the notification bell after you subscribe to the channel. So of course I will be uploading more testing in future videos. Now, another pro tip here, that if you want as less latency as possible inside a No Man's Sky, both when you're moving your body and also in terms of the blinders from left to right when you're rotating your head, well, I suggest that you completely turn off ambient inclusion, as this really does eat up in terms of the settings inside of the graphics of the game. And to be honest with you, it doesn't really make that much a difference when you have them on or whether you have them off. So, I mean, it's completely up to you, but I'm just saying that for me, you know, I just completely turned them off and I had a much better experience inside of No Man's Sky. However, with both, with both routers, I have to say that I didn't have any issues with the audio. There was no crackling, no, latency in the audio itself. Everything was working completely smoothly. When I was inside of the Starship, I didn't have any issues either. You know, the Starship was just cruising at its own speed for quite a long time. It was very relaxing, I have to admit. And, you know, everything worked really, really well there. So no issues with both routers, I have to admit. In terms of the graphics, as I mentioned before, you know, other than the ambient inclusion, no issues there when you set them up, you know, at 200 or 250% inside of SteamVR. So in conclusion, if you're someone who's looking to upgrade to Wi-Fi 6, first of all, do it. It's that simple. Because as someone who has a Wi-Fi 5 router after being sent the routers from Asus, and thank you so much Asus for sending us the routers, by the way, I have to admit it's made a world of difference when streaming any applications from my Pico 4 to the PC to SteamVR using virtual desktop. If, however, you're wondering whether you should upgrade directly to a Rog Rapture Beast or whether, you know, you should just get an XT8 from Asus, well, to be very honest with you, I would just get the XT8 because it is really good enough. You know, I think really, I mean, I can't confirm, of course, because I have an RTX 2070, but I do believe that if I have an RTX 3 series or 4000 series even, then I think the XT8 would give me a lot of good enough oomph there. But maybe if you're someone who's an arcade or you're an enterprise or you're someone who really does have a lot of other appliances hooked up to your network and especially have more than 1 gigahertz broadband network, then definitely, you know, for sure, I think that, you know, the Rog Rapture would definitely be more suitable for your needs. But if you're someone like me who only has 1 gigahertz broadband network and, you know, 400 Mbps in bitrate is actually more than good enough to have very decent graphic quality and also audio when you're away from your router about 10 meters with a wall and the door closed in between, then I think it will do the job just fine. But, you know, do subscribe, do make sure, you hit the notification bell after you subscribe, as I will be doing more testing with other apps in the future. So we will do more testing, for example, with Half-Life Alyx as well. And do leave a comment below. Let me know what other VR experiences you would like me to test as well, so I can upload those videos and do the test for you in future videos. So the big winner in today's video, guys, is actually the Asus XT8 6600 series, where I was able to pull the best gameplay using 200% in SteamVR Super Sampling. And the best graphic settings that I was able to get is for the texture quality was set at ultra, animation quality was set at high, the shadow quality at enhanced, post-processing at ultra, reflections at enhanced, volumetric effects at ultra, terrain tessellation at ultra, planet quality at ultra as well, and the base complexity at standard. For the anisotropic sampling or filtering was set at 16. The GTAO, which is basically the ambient inclusion, this, as I said before, turn it off. No need for ambient inclusion, and also for the anti-aliasing, DLSS at ultra performance. So guys, thank you so much for spending some time together. I really had a lot of fun. Do leave any queries or questions that you may have in the comments below the video, as I most probably forgot to talk about some aspects, so very happy to answer any queries there. But I was really surprised by the Rog Rapture, I have to admit, and the fact that, you know, my gameplay in No Man's Sky at least was much more comfortable using the XT8. Until next time, guys, do make sure you hit those likes, smash that subscription button, and also make sure that you hit the notifications, because I will upload future videos and you don't want to miss those. Alright, until next time, stay safe, have fun, and see you in VR. Bye for now, guys. Bye for now.